In this series of videos, I've been talking about the logic of natural selection. And in this video, we'll be tying together previous observations that Darwin made about the natural world and how he then made a logical leap, an inference about how nature worked. So in previous videos, we talked about population growth, exponential population growth, and then in the follow-up, talked about how despite exponential population growth, populations tend to be stable, and that because resources are limiting, they remain stable. They can't grow beyond their carrying capacity. Now we'll move on to the inference. What are the implications of all of this? So we have exponential population growth here, but we tend to, which is the ability of all organisms to increase exponentially. However, most of the time we don't see rapid population growth. We look out in the world and we see populations that are relatively stable. And that is due to limited resources. So what can we infer from this about what's going on in nature? So Darwin's first inference was because we don't see exponential population growth everywhere, not all offspring that are produced are surviving and reproducing. Most offspring die. Most acorns produced by a tree never germinate. Even those that do happen to germinate are usually eaten or freeze over the winter. So if all of those acorns were to survive, we would see exponential population growth, but we don't. So most offspring of all organisms, whether it's an oak or some other organism, they're all dying. Again, if that didn't happen, we would see exponential population growth. There would be exponential increase in the number of oak trees in my backyard if all or even most of those offspring survived. So this results in a struggle for resources. There has to be some sort of limiting factor, a struggle for resources, water, light, etc., that is occurring among all these offspring, and that is imposing the finite size they have to be. So what is it that influences survival? So population reaches a stable point. Population stays. So Darwin's logic is populations are stable despite the ability for exponential population growth, and this is due to limited resources. So this is the way the logic works. Populations tend to be stable when we see them out in nature. This is despite the ability for exponential population growth, and this is explained by limited resources. Stated another way, populations don't grow continually because resources are limited. They do produce enough offspring, or all organisms produce or can produce enough offspring to grow exponentially, but most of those offspring die. So this creates a struggle for existence, or differential survival. There are winners and losers. Doesn't necessarily mean literal struggle. In some cases, it means competition among offspring or competition among organisms of the same species. But so struggle for existence is meant to mean that there are winners and losers. Sometimes they engage in actual competition or struggle. Sometimes they don't. Marr puts it this way: since more individuals are produced than can be supported by the available resources, but population size remains the same, it means that there must be a fierce struggle for existence among the individual's population, resulting in the survival of only part, often a very small part, of the progeny, of the offspring of each generation. Now, the struggle can take different forms. The squirrels in my backyard are all trying to get more seeds. The ones that get the most seeds are most likely to survive the winter. The oak trees, acorns, some of them are lucky and fall in my flower beds, in which case they can survive, and a few of those we let grow up. Most of them fall into my yard and they get mowed up or raked up. The oak seedlings, the acorns aren't actually struggling with each other, but there is differential survival. They are winners and losers. So this wraps up the three ecological observations and how they are tied into this ecological inference. In the next set of videos, I'll talk about Darwin's genetics observations and how he tied genetics and ecology together for his second inference.